The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what lay beyond. In the year 2247, those dreams finally came true. But what humanity found among the stars was not wonder. It was betrayal. The first alien ship appeared above Earth on a cold morning in January. It was massive, stretching across the sky like a floating city. People gathered in the streets, pointing upward with hope in their hearts. Scientists sent messages of peace. Leaders prepared speeches of friendship. Everyone believed this was the beginning of something beautiful. They were wrong. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Council. They were a union of 47 different species who had ruled the Milky Way for over 10,000 years. Their representative, a tall creature named Velthos, with silver skin and cold black eyes, came down to meet with Earth's leaders. He spoke with a voice that sounded like grinding stones. "We have watched your species for some time," Velthos said. "You are young. You are violent. You spread like fire across your world, consuming everything. The Council has decided to evaluate you." For 6 months, the Council studied humanity. They watched our cities and our wars. They read our history books and saw our weapons. They measured our technology and calculated how fast we were growing. And when they finished, they called a great meeting on their homeworld to decide humanity's fate. Unibeak was only 30 years old then, but she was already one of Earth's most respected diplomats. She traveled to the Council homeworld to speak for humanity. The chamber was enormous, filled with thousands of alien representatives. Some had scales, some had wings, some floated in tanks of strange liquids. All of them looked at Yuna with suspicion. "Honored members of the Council," Yuna said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Humanity comes in peace. Yes, we have made mistakes. Yes, we have fought wars. But we have also created art and music. We have shown kindness and love. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves." Velthos stood slowly. His silver face showed no emotion. "We have heard enough. The evidence is clear. Humans advance too quickly. They cannot control their own nature. In 1,000 years, they will challenge our power. In 2,000, they may destroy us all. The Council votes for exile." A single voice rose in objection. Her name was Miravel, a diplomat from a peaceful species called the Kethany. She had blue skin and gentle eyes that seemed full of sadness. "This is not justice," Miravel said. "You condemn an entire species for crimes they have not committed. Give them time. Give them guidance. The vote is final," Velthos replied. "Humanity will be removed to the dead zone. They will have no contact with Council space. Any human found in our territory will be destroyed." The dead zone. Even Yuna had heard of it. A vast region at the edge of the galaxy where no life existed, no planets worth living on, no resources worth taking. It was a graveyard of empty space. The exile began immediately. Council ships surrounded Earth and all human colonies. Soldiers in black armor forced families onto transport vessels. Those who resisted were killed. Millions of people were packed into ships like animals. Given barely enough food and water for the journey, Jinho Park was 18 years old when the soldiers came to his colony on Mars. He lived with his mother, father, and younger sister in a small settlement near the northern ice caps. His father was an engineer. His mother was a teacher. They were simple people who had never hurt anyone. The Council soldiers did not care. "Move faster," a soldier shouted, pushing Jinho's mother to the ground. His father tried to help her up, and a soldier hit him with the back of his weapon. Blood poured from his father's head. "Stop!" Jinho screamed. He ran toward his father, but strong hands grabbed him and threw him onto a transport ship. Through a small window, he watched as his family's settlement burned. He watched as his mother reached for the ship, crying his name. He watched as a Council vessel fired its weapons. And everything he loved turned to ash. Something broke inside Jinho that day. Something that would never heal. As the transport ship carried him toward the dead zone, he made a promise to himself. He would survive. He would grow strong. And one day, he would make them pay. The journey to the dead zone took 3 months. Many ships did not survive. Engine failures, disease, and starvation killed thousands. When the survivors finally arrived at their new home, they found exactly what they expected: nothing. The dead zone was a collection of dying stars and barren rocks. The planets had no air, no water, no life. The Council had sent humanity here to die slowly, forgotten by the rest of the galaxy, but they did not know humans. In those first terrible months, elites emerged from the chaos. Unibeak, who had failed to save humanity at the trial, now worked tirelessly to save what remained. She organized the survivors. She rationed supplies. She gave people hope when there was none. "They want us to disappear," Una told the gathered survivors, standing on a platform made of broken ship parts. "They want us to fade away like a bad memory. But we are not memories. We are humans. And humans do not die quietly." Around her, millions of tired faces looked up. Some were crying. Some were angry. All of them were broken in different ways. But as Una spoke, something changed in their eyes. A small flame appeared. A flame called hope. "We will build new homes on these dead worlds," Una continued. "We will find resources they said did not exist. We will create technology they cannot imagine. And when we are ready, we will return. Not as beggars asking for mercy, but as equals demanding respect." The crowd began to cheer. It started soft, like distant thunder, then grew into a roar that shook the very air. Ginho Park stood among them, his hands clenched into fists. He thought of his mother's face. He thought of his father's blood. He thought of his sister, who he never saw again. "They cast us into darkness," Una shouted, her voice rising above the crowd. "We will become the fire." And so began the exile of humanity, cast out by a galaxy that feared them, left to die in the emptiness between stars. The Council believed they had solved their human problem. They returned to their comfortable lives and forgot about the small, angry species they had thrown away. They would remember soon enough. 100 years passed in the dead zone, 100 years of silence. The Galactic Council did not send ships to check on humanity. They did not send messages or spies. To them, the human problem was solved. The dangerous species was dying somewhere far away, and that was enough. They could not have been more wrong. In those 100 years, humanity did not die. Humanity transformed. The first decade was the hardest. People lived in cramped ships and underground caves. Food was scarce. Medicine was scarcer. Every day was a fight for survival. Many gave up hope and simply stopped eating. Others fought over the little resources that remained. It seemed like the Council would get their wish after all. But Unibeak refused to let her people fall apart. She traveled from settlement to settlement, speaking to survivors, solving disputes, and reminding everyone why they needed to stay strong. She was no longer just a diplomat. She was a symbol. People started calling her Chancellor, and the name stuck. "Every death feeds their satisfaction," Una told her people. "Every time we give up, they win. We will not give them that pleasure." Slowly, things began to change. Engineers found ways to extract water from ice-covered asteroids. Scientists discovered how to grow food in artificial light. Doctors created new medicines from strange plants found on distant moons. Humanity was not just surviving anymore. They were adapting. The real breakthrough came in the year 2267, 20 years after the exile began. A young scientist named Hannah Lim was studying a piece of Council technology that had been secretly stolen during the evacuation. It was an engine core, damaged, but still functional. Hannah spent 5 years taking it apart and putting it back together, learning its secrets. One night, she made a discovery that would change everything. "The Council's engines are inefficient," Hannah announced to a room full of engineers. "They waste almost half their energy. I believe we can build something better. Something much better." Within 3 years, Hannah and her team created the first human-designed faster-than-light engine. It was smaller, faster, and more powerful than anything the Council had. Ships that once took months to travel between stars could now make the journey in days. But Hannah was not finished. During her research, she discovered something strange about the dead zone. The Council had sent humanity here. because they believed nothing valuable existed in this region. They were wrong. Deep beneath the surface of a frozen planet, Hannah found crystals that glowed with purple light. She called them void crystals. When tested, these crystals produced energy levels that seemed impossible. A single crystal the size of a finger could power a ship for a decade. A larger crystal could power an entire city. "The council threw us into a gold mine," Hannah said, laughing with disbelief. They had no eye. What was here? With unlimited energy and advanced engines, humanity began to expand. They built cities on planets the council thought were worthless. They created factories that produced ships, weapons, and technology. The scattered survivors became an organized civilization. Chancellor Unibeak officially named it the United Human Dominion. Ginho. Park was no longer the broken teenager who watched his family die. He was now a man in his 40s, and he had spent every day since the exile preparing for revenge. He joined the military the moment it was formed and rose through the ranks with terrifying speed. Ginho was smart, but that was not what made him special. What made him special was his hatred. It burned inside him like a cold fire, never fading, never weakening. He studied council tactics. He learned their weaknesses. He designed battle plans that turned small forces into unstoppable armies. By the year 2300, Ginho Park was admiral of the human stellar navy. Under his command, humanity built a fleet of over 5,000 warships. Each ship was faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything the council possessed. But Ginho knew they were not ready yet. The council had millions of ships. 5,000 was not enough. "We need more time," Ginho told Chancellor Yuna during a private meeting. 10 more years? Maybe 20. Then we strike." Yuna nodded slowly. She was older now, her hair white, and her face lined with wrinkles. But her eyes were still sharp, still burning with the same fire from 100 years ago. "I may not live to see it," she said. "But I trust you, Ginho. Finish what we started." The next 40 years were spent in preparation. The Dominion grew to control over 200 star systems, all hidden from council detection. Shipyards worked day and night, producing vessels of war. Soldiers trained in combat techniques designed specifically to counter council forces. Scientists developed weapons that could tear through enemy shields like paper. Captain Taeyun Kong became one of Jinho's most trusted officers. He was younger than the admiral, born in the dead zone to parents who survived the exile. Taeyun had never seen Earth, never known a life outside of war preparation. He was a pure product of human determination. "I want you to lead reconnaissance missions into council space," Ginho told him. "Map their defenses. Find their weak points. Do not engage unless necessary." Juan smiled. It was a cold smile, the smile of a hunter. "Understood, Admiral." 3 years, Taeyun led small teams across the border. They moved like ghosts, watching council patrols, studying their patterns, and recording everything. The information they brought back was invaluable. The council had grown lazy in their peace. Their defenses were old. Their soldiers were untested. They had forgotten what real war looked like. In the year 2347, exactly 100 years after the exile, Admiral Ginho Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive dreadnought named Vengeance. It was the largest ship humanity had ever built, powered by a void crystal the size of a house. Around him, his officers worked in focused silence. On the main screen, a holographic map showed council space. Billions of stars, thousands of inhabited planets, all controlled by the species that had condemned humanity to death. Ginho stared at the map for a long time. He thought about his mother. He thought about his father. He thought about his sister. 100 years, he said quietly. They've forgotten about us. They believe we are dead. General Woojin Choi, commander of ground forces, stood beside him. He was a large man with scars across his face, earned in training exercises that would have killed lesser soldiers. "When do we remind them?" Woojin asked. Ginho turned to face him. His eyes held no mercy, no doubt, no hesitation. Only cold, patient fury. "Soon, the Admiral replied. Very soon, somewhere in Council space, High Counselor Velthus was celebrating the anniversary of human exile. He raised a glass to his fellow council members and made a toast to lasting peace. He had no idea that in the darkness beyond his borders, 8,000 warships were waiting. He had no idea that humanity had not just survived. Humanity had evolved, and they were coming. The Torvan patrol fleet was on a routine mission near the Outer Rim when they detected something unusual. Their sensors showed energy signatures coming from a region that should have been empty. Commander Draxus, a veteran warrior with scales the color of dried blood, ordered his ships to investigate. Probably smugglers, his second officer suggested. Shall I send a warning signal? Draxus shook his massive head. No warnings. We destroy first, ask questions later. The Torvan were one of the most feared species in the Council. They were large reptilian creatures built for combat. Their ships were heavy and powerful, designed to crush enemies through brute force. For centuries, no one had challenged them. They had forgotten what it felt like to lose. As Draxus brought his fleet of 30 warships closer to the energy source, his sensors began to show strange readings. Ships. Human ships. At first, Draxus thought it was a mistake. Humans had been exiled 100 years ago. They should be dead by now. Impossible, Draxus growled. Those primitives survived? His weapons officer looked nervous. Sir, they're ships. They are not like any design in our database. It does not matter, Draxus replied. They are still human, weak, pathetic. All ships prepare to attack. The Torvan fleet moved into formation and charged their weapons. They outnumbered the human ships they could see, and Torvan warriors never showed mercy. Draxus smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This would be an easy victory. He was wrong. Captain Taeon Kong watched the Torvan approach from the bridge of his cruiser. Iron Will. He had been mining void crystals in this sector when the patrol appeared. Now he had a choice to make. Run and hide, as Admiral Jinho had ordered, or stand and fight. Taeon made his choice in less than a second. All ships, battle stations, he commanded. Form defensive line. Let them come to us. His fleet was smaller than the Torvan force. Only 12 ships against 30, but Taeon knew something the Torvan did not. Human ships were not the same weak vessels from a century ago. They were monsters, hiding in smaller bodies. The Torvan fired first. Massive energy beams shot across space, aimed at the human ships. In any normal battle, those shots would have torn through shields and destroyed their targets instantly. They did not even scratch the human vessels. What? Draxus roared. Fire again. Full power. More shots. More nothing. The human shields absorbed everything the Torvan threw at them, glowing purple with void crystal energy. Draxus felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. My turn, Taeon said calmly. All ships, fire at will. The human weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They did not shoot energy beams or missiles. They shot concentrated gravity wells, tiny singularities that collapsed everything they touched. The first Torvan ship folded in on itself like paper being crushed by an invisible hand. The second exploded before its crew could even scream. The third, fourth, and fifth followed in seconds. Draxus watched in horror as his fleet was destroyed around him. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being swatted like insects. His warriors, the finest soldiers in the Council, were dying without landing a single hit. Draxus commanded. All ships, retreat. But it was too late. Human vessels moved faster than anything the Torvin had ever seen. They appeared behind fleeing ships and cut them down without mercy. In 11 minutes, the entire Torvin patrol fleet was destroyed. Only Draxus's flagship remained, damaged and drifting. Taeyun appeared on Draxus's screen, his face calm and cold. "Tell your council what happened here today. Tell them humanity sends their regards." And Taeyun let him go. One ship, one survivor, to carry the message back to council space. It was not mercy. It was a warning. The news reached High Counselor Velthus 3 days later. He was in his chambers reviewing trade agreements when his assistant burst through the door with panic in his eyes. "High Counselor, the Outer Rim Patrol. They were destroyed. All of them." Velthus did not look up from his documents. "Pirates, rebels?" "Humans, sir." Now Velthos looked up. His silver face showed confusion, then disbelief, then anger. "That is impossible. Humans are extinct." "Survive, sir." "He is requesting an emergency council session. He says the humans have weapons we have never seen. He says they destroyed 30 warships in minutes." The emergency session was held that same day. Representatives from all 47 species gathered in the great chamber, whispering nervously among themselves. Draxus stood before them, his proud warrior's body now shaking with fear. "They were not the same humans we exiled," Draxus said, his voice broken. "They have evolved. Their ships are faster. Their weapons are stronger. They tore through us like we were nothing." Velthus listened to the report with growing irritation. When Draxus finished, the High Counselor stood and addressed the chamber. "My fellow council members, let us not panic over a single skirmish. The humans got lucky. Nothing more. They are still a primitive species living on the edge of nothing. We have millions of ships, trillions of soldiers. They are a minor threat at best." But not everyone agreed. Ambassador Miravel, the same diplomat who had spoken for humanity a century ago, raised her voice. "I warned you this would happen," she said. "You created an enemy where there was none. Now that enemy has grown strong in the darkness, you pushed them into." "Silence," Velthus commanded. "The humans want attention. We'll not give it to them. Increase border patrols and destroy any human vessel on sight. This matter is closed." It was not closed. 1 week later, Chancellor Unibeek's face appeared on every screen in council space. She was old now, over 130 years old, kept alive by advanced human medicine. But her voice was strong, and her words were fire. "People of the Galactic Council," Una began. 100 years ago, you condemned my species to death. You took our homes, killed our families, and threw us into darkness. You believed we would disappear. You were wrong." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We do not want war, want justice. We demand formal apology for the crimes committed against humanity. We demand reparations for the millions who died during the exile. We demand equal standing in galactic affairs. You have 30 days to respond. If our demands are not met, there will be consequences." The council's response came the next day. It was a single word. No, they also sent insults. Velthus called humans rats pretending to be wolves. Other council members laughed at the demands. They truly believed humanity was bluffing. Admiral Ginho Park received the council's response on the Bridge of the Vengeance. He read it once, then deleted it. His face showed no emotion, but inside, his cold fire burned brighter than ever. Admiral Taeyun asked, "Your orders?" Ginho turned to face his officers. Round him, the bridge crew waited in silence. They had prepared for this moment their entire lives. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier had been built for this single purpose. "Operation Crimson Dawn," Ginho said. "All fleets, attack." That night, human warships emerged from hidden positions across the galaxy. They struck 15 council military installations simultaneously. Shipyards burned, defense stations crumbled. Thousands of council ships were destroyed before they could even launch. In his chambers, Velthus received the reports with trembling hands. Fire, destruction, death. It was happening everywhere at once. The humans were not bluffing. They were not rats. They were wolves. And they were hungry. The war that followed shook the galaxy to its core. For 10,000 years, the Council had maintained peace through control. They decided which species could travel between stars. They decided which technologies were allowed. They decided who lived and who died. No one had ever challenged their power until now. The human stellar navy moved through Council space like a storm. Admiral Jinho Park led the main fleet, striking at military targets with surgical precision. He did not attack civilian populations. He did not destroy trading routes. He wanted the Council to know that humans were not monsters. They were soldiers. General Woojin Choi led ground forces in the liberation of occupied worlds. Any planets under Council rule were not there by choice. Smaller species had been conquered centuries ago, their cultures erased, their people turned into servants. When human soldiers arrived, they did not come as conquerors. They came as liberators. On the planet Kethros, General Woojin met with local resistance leaders. They were small creatures, barely reaching his waist, with large eyes filled with tears. "You are really human?" one of them asked. "The species the Council banished?" Woojin nodded. "We are. Help us. We did nothing for you." Woojin knelt down to meet the creature's eyes, because we know what it feels like to be thrown away. Now, no one deserves to live under their boot. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. Humans were not the savage monsters the Council had described. They were fair. They were kind to those who surrendered. They protected civilians and punished only those who had committed crimes. Species that had lived in fear of the Council for generations began to see hope. The Veltari were the first to defect. They were a warrior species, proud and strong, who had been forced to serve as Council soldiers for centuries. When human ships appeared above their homeworld, the Veltari commander did something unexpected. He ordered his fleet to stand down. "We will not fight you," he transmitted to Admiral Jinho. "We will fight with you." More species followed. Kethany, whose ambassador Myravel had defended humanity a century ago, openly declared support for the human cause. Smaller species sent whatever ships and soldiers they could spare. What started as a human war became a galactic revolution. High Counselor Velthus watched the reports with growing fury. His allies were abandoning him. His military was being destroyed. Everything he had built over centuries was crumbling. "Summon the Grand Armada," Velthos commanded. "Every ship from every loyal species, we will crush this rebellion once and for all." The Grand Armada was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 50,000 warships gathered at the Orion Gate, a strategic point that controlled access to the core systems. Velthus placed his most trusted commander, Warlord Draxus, in charge.
Draxus
Had survived the first battle with humans.
Draxus
He knew their tactics. He would not fail again. "Do not underestimate them," Draxus warned his captains. "They are faster than us. They hit harder than us. We must use our numbers to overwhelm them." Admiral Jinho received intelligence about the Grand Armada from spies within Council space. 50,000 ships against his 8,000. The numbers seemed impossible. His officers urged caution. They suggested retreat, guerrilla tactics, anything but direct confrontation. Jinho refused. "If we run, they will call us cowards," he said. "If we hide, they will hunt us forever. We'll end this now at Orion's Gate." The battle that followed would be remembered for millennia. Human ships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation against the vast wall of Council vessels. They looked like a handful of stars against an endless night. Draxus smiled when he saw them. This time, he would not lose. "All ships, attack," Draxus commanded. The Council fleet surged forward. Thousands of weapons fired at once, filling space with deadly light. It should have been the end of humanity's rebellion. But Admiral Jinho had prepared for this moment his entire life. "Execute Pattern Omega-7, Jinho ordered. Human ships did not meet the attack head-on. Instead, they vanished. Using their superior engines, they jumped short distances across the battlefield, appearing behind enemy lines, beside command ships, inside defensive formations. They were everywhere, and nowhere at once. Council ships began firing on each other in confusion. Their communication networks, unprepared for such chaos, collapsed under the strain. Captains screamed for orders that never came. Soldiers panicked, as human vessels appeared out of nothing and destroyed them before they could react. Captain Taeyun Kong led a strike force directly at Draxus's flagship. His weapons tore through the vessel's shields like they were made of paper. On the bridge, Draxus watched in horror as his ship fell apart around him. "What are they?" Draxus whispered. Taeyun appeared on his screen one final time. "We are human. We remember everything." The flagship exploded. Draxus the warrior, who had never known defeat until he met humanity, was gone. Without their commander, the Grand Armada fell into chaos. Ships fled in every direction, pursued by human vessels that showed no mercy. By the end of the battle, 30,000 council ships had been destroyed, the rest scattered across the galaxy. Broken and terrified, Admiral Jinho stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the aftermath. Bodies floated in space. Wreckage stretched for millions of kilometers. It was the largest naval battle in history, and humanity had won. But Jinho felt no joy, only tired satisfaction. The war was not over yet. Set course for the Council homeworld, he ordered. 3 weeks later, human ships surrounded the planet where humanity's fate had been sealed a century ago. The Council's remaining defenses were no match for the fleet that had destroyed the Grand Armada. They surrendered without a fight. Chancellor Unibeak traveled to the surface to meet High Counselor Velthus. She was carried in a special chair now, her body too old to walk. But her mind was sharp, and her spirit was unbroken. Velthus stood before her in chains, his silver skin pale with fear. Around them, billions of aliens watched through broadcasts. The species that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years was about to face judgment. "A century ago, you called us a virus," Una said, her voice echoing across the planet. "You said we would destroy the galaxy if we were not contained. You murdered our families. You stole our homes. You threw us into darkness and hoped we would die." She leaned forward in her chair, her old eyes burning with cold fire. "You were right about one thing. We are dangerous. We adapted to your cruelty. We grew strong from your hatred. We turned your punishment into our power." She paused, letting silence fill the air. "And now your immunity has failed." Velthus fell to his knees. For the first time in his long life, he begged, "Please, mercy. We were afraid. We made a mistake." Una looked at him for a long moment. She thought about all the humans who had died during the exile. She thought about the families torn apart, the children who never grew up, the dreams that were destroyed. Part of her wanted to give the order. One word, and the Council homeworld would burn. But that was not why they had fought. "We did not come here for revenge," Una said finally. "We came here for justice. Justice is not the same as cruelty." She turned to face the cameras, speaking now to the entire galaxy. "The old Council is finished. But we will not replace one tyrant with another. A new order begins today. An order built on equality, not fear. On cooperation, not control." Admiral Ginho watched from orbit, his hand resting on the weapons console. One command, and he could erase everything. Avenge his parents. Avenge his sister. Avenge every human who had suffered. But he remembered his mother's face. She had been kind. She would not have wanted this. Slowly, Jinho removed his hand from the console. The war was over. Now came the harder part, building peace. The surrender ceremony took place in the same chamber where humanity had been condemned a century ago. Admiral Jinho Park walked through the massive doors with Chancellor Unibeak at his side. She refused to be carried this time. With the help of advanced support braces, she walked on her own 2 feet. She wanted the galaxy to see human strength one final time. The chamber was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Some were former council members, their faces pale with shame and fear. Others were the liberated species who had joined humanity's cause. And watching from balconies above, billions of citizens followed the broadcast on screens throughout known space. High Counselor Velthos stood in chains at the center of the chamber. His silver skin had lost its shine. His proud posture was broken. He looked like exactly what he was, a defeated tyrant facing judgment. "Velthus of the Rylon species," Ginho announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You were charged with crimes against humanity. Forced exile, mass murder, destruction of civilian vessels, the deaths of over 60 million humans during the relocation. How do you answer?" Velthus raised his head slowly. There was no fight left in his eyes. "I answer guilty. I did what I thought was necessary to protect the galaxy. I was wrong." The chamber fell silent. Many had expected Velthus to argue, to make excuses, to blame others. His simple admission surprised everyone. Una stepped forward. Her voice was weaker than it had been decades ago, but every word carried weight. The old council believed that peace could only exist through control. They were afraid of anything different, anything new, anything they could not predict. That fear led them to commit terrible acts. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with representatives from dozens of species. But fear is not strength. Control is not peace. True peace comes from trust, from respect, from the understanding that we are all part of something larger than ourselves. Una turned back to Velthus. "You will spend the rest of your life in prison. Not as revenge, but as justice. Your crimes must have consequences. But your people, the ordinary citizens who followed your orders, will not be punished. We will not become what you were." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Many of the liberated species had wanted blood. They had suffered under council rule for centuries. But Una's words reminded them of something important. Revenge would only create new cycles of hatred. Over the following months, the galaxy transformed. The old council was officially dissolved. In its place, Chancellor Unibeak announced the formation of the Galactic Federation. Unlike the council, the Federation would give equal voice to every species, no matter how small or young. Ambassador Myravel of the Kethany was among the first to join. She had believed in humanity when no one else did, and now she stood beside them as they rebuilt the galaxy. "Hey, you could have destroyed us," Myravel said to Una during a private meeting. "After everything we let happen to your people, you would have been justified." Una smiled softly. "Destruction is easy. Any species can learn to kill. But building something new, something better, that takes real courage." Dr. Hannah Lim, now one of the oldest humans alive, led the effort to share technology with the galaxy. The void crystals that had powered humanity's rise were distributed freely. Advanced medical techniques that had extended human lifespans were taught to all species. Within a decade, diseases that had plagued civilizations for millennia were cured. "Knowledge is not a weapon," Hannah said during a broadcast to the Federation. "It is a gift." The Council hoarded technology to maintain control. "We will share it to build trust." The former Council species, those who had voted for humanity's exile, struggled to adjust. Many felt shame. Others felt resentment. But as years passed and they saw how humans treated them, attitudes began to change. Humans did not enslave them. Humans did not take their resources. Humans helped them rebuild. On a small planet in what was once council space, Torvin Child asked his teacher about the war. "Why did the humans forgive us?" "We tried to kill them all." The teacher, an old Torvin, who had fought in the Grand Armada and survived, thought carefully before answering. "Because they understood something we did not. Hatred is a prison. If they had stayed angry forever, they would have become like us. They chose to be free instead." Admiral Jinho Park retired from military service 5 years after the war ended. He had given his entire life to preparing for battle, and now that battle was over. At first, he did not know what to do with himself. The anger that had driven him for so long was fading, leaving a hollow feeling in its place. General Woojin Choi visited him at his small home on a quiet planet, far from the bustle of Federation politics. They sat together on a porch overlooking mountains that reminded Jinho of the pictures his father had shown him of Earth. "I still dream about them," Jinho admitted. "My mother, my father, my sister, I see their faces every night." Woojin nodded slowly. He understood. Every soldier who had survived the exile carried ghosts. "Do you regret not destroying the council completely?" "We had the power." Jinho was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No, my mother would not have wanted that. She was kind. She believed people could change. He looked up at the sky where distant stars twinkled in the fading light. I think she would be proud of what we built. The memorial was constructed on the original site of the Mars colony, where Jinho had lived as a child. It was a simple structure, a wall of black stone with the names of everyone who had died during the exile. 60 million names, carved in letters so small you had to get close to read them. Ginho visited the memorial on the 100th anniversary of the exile's end. He was old now, his hair white and his body frail. But he walked without help, placing one foot in front of the other until he reached the section where his family's names were carved. Park Minho, Park Sumin, Park Jian, his father, his mother, his sister. You did it, Ginho whispered. We made them remember us. Chancellor Unibeek passed away peacefully in her sleep that same year. She was 160 years old, the longest-lived human in history at that time. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the Federation. Even former council members came to pay respects. Her final words, recorded just days before her death, were broadcast across the galaxy. I have lived long enough to see my people rise from exile to leadership, Yuna said, her voice thin but steady. We did not do this alone. Our allies stood with us. Our enemies became our friends, and our children will inherit a galaxy that is finally whole. She smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the young diplomat who had stood before the council 160 years ago, asking for mercy that never came. We were thrown into darkness, and we became the fire. But fire does not only destroy, it also gives light. It gives warmth. It shows the way forward. Her eyes closed gently. The galaxy is no longer theirs. It is no longer ours. It belongs to all of us, together. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. The story of humanity's exile and return became legend, taught in schools across the Federation. Children of every species learned about the small, stubborn creatures who had been cast out by the galaxy and came back to save it. A saying spread among the stars, repeated by traders and soldiers and diplomats whenever they faced impossible odds. Never corner a human. When the universe pushed them to the edge, they did not fall. They learned to fly. And somewhere in the endless black of space, on a small blue planet called Earth that had been reclaimed and restored to its former beauty, a young human girl looked up at the night sky. She did not know about exile or war or revenge. She only knew that the stars were beautiful and that they belonged to everyone. She reached up her hand as if trying to touch the light. Someday, she whispered, I will go there. Because that is what humans do. They dream. They fight. They fall. And they always, always rise again. The end.